Is working from home morally wrong?
No, it's not.
The more you find out that this phenomena of how work has changed, and let's just say it has changed, is not just an American thing. It's a global thing. It's in Asia, it's in Europe, Latin America, and also in Africa. Bringing some of this information forward so that our audience, as well as others that are researching this topic, can have this stuff at their fingertips, I think is going to be very beneficial.
It was a scary time. That beginning of the pandemic, people were home. You're worrying about so many different things. And I think to keep your mind off of the scary the first few months of that pandemic, it was scary, very stressful, worried about your health. And you needed that opportunity to distract yourself. So putting in a couple extra hours was a good thing.
You're listening to
What the Tech.
Welcome to the What the Tech podcast, where we talk about business and office technology and put our 20 years of expertise to discussing trends and issues impacting the workplace.
3 years ago, the world experienced an unprecedented event, a pandemic that forced millions of people to work from home and adjust a whole new way of life. This change sparked a new preference among many employees favoring remote work setup. But the question remains, does the research and economic data support the claims regarding work from home? In today's episode, we are delving into the most recent data, bringing to light the cold, hard facts about remote and hybrid working. Over there is my buddy from Southern New Hampshire, Dave Kelly.
And joining us over here, right outside the nation's capital, right outside of DC, Global Tech Worldwide's founder, Rolando Rosas. Rolando,
hey,
nice to see you, buddy.
Thank you. Yes, I'm glad to be here. And, Dave, a couple of months ago, we had one of the podcast's favorite guests that we like having on, Steve Cadigan of LinkedIn, or formerly of LinkedIn. And he had mentioned to us that he's been retained, he's a consultant, and he's been retained by several Fortune 500 companies that have hired him multiple times to coach the middle management of those companies to convince C-level executives on remote working and using it and deploying it and continuing that effort. And, I got to thinking, well, let's help some of the folks that are listening to us and that probably will come across this information as helpful with actual research. What's the research say about remote working? Are there numbers that prove without a shadow of a doubt that this is beneficial, not just for the employees, but for the organization as well, and the profitability? Because that's the bottom line. You're in business to make money and to be profitable. If you're not profitable, you ain't going to be around for very long.
Right.
And so if remote working does cut into the profits, let's look at that data. Or conversely, does it help raise profits? And I think we have some real compelling numbers about how it can actually boost the bottom line.
Yeah, looking forward to really checking out these numbers. What I thought was cool about Steve Cadigan, he started writing Workquake prior to the pandemic. So here we are, post-pandemic, summer of 2023. For the past 2.5 years, everyone has been talking about work from home. And actually, it was certainly forced upon us. Luckily, we're in a world where we've had the technology available for a very long time. It was a matter of working with people to increase adoption, show them the technology, the value of that, and, work with the deployment piece. But Workquake, Steve was already talking about this long before.
Yes.
Long before it was thrown upon us.
And he was talking about, also included in that was work culture and how that's changing. And I mean, he couldn't have foreseen that, he seems like a prophet now, but he couldn't have foreseen the global pandemic that would completely change our lives. And the more that we read into this topic and researched it, the more you find out that this phenomena of how work has changed, and let's just say it has changed, is not just an American thing. It's a global thing. It's in Asia, it's in Europe, Latin America, and also in Africa. So bringing some of this information forward so that our audience, as well as others that are researching this topic, can have this stuff at their fingertips, I think is going to be very beneficial for lots of folks involved. So let's go right into it, Dave. Let's go into some of the research that's out right now. You know, when we were looking at this, we were looking at where could we find studies that actually have some stats on some of this. And so ProtoScore did a research on 105 million data points. And I'm going to read it to you exactly word for word. After evaluating 105 million data points from 30,000 US-based ProtoScore users, we discovered a 5% increase in productivity during the pandemic work from home period. And this is the president of ProtoScore. Although, and now I'm quoting him directly again, although as we know, any variant of the COVID-19 virus is unpredictable, this is the important part, employee productivity is not. So that is really interesting on so many levels. One, 105 million data points, not 5, not 10, not 100, not even 50,000, 105 million data points. And then the next part that was even more interesting was that the productivity of employees was predictable, not unpredictable. And in that article, he goes on to say that workers that were performing well or doing good work, and I'm paraphrasing now, workers that were doing well or performing well on site at the office also did the same offsite while working remotely, as well as those that were not good performers were also not good performers when it came to remote work. And I would imagine, Dave, that not just the fact that you may have some workers that are maybe not productive when they're offsite, in a lot of cases, and you know, we're in the trenches with a lot of companies with this. A lot of companies deployed minimally or inadequate solutions to their workers throughout the pandemic. And some have improved that as we've moved along, but a lot of workers went home without the right tools.
And I don't know if I would have initially guessed that productivity would have gone up, but Rolando, so you're telling me in the study that you have right here, productivity increased by 5%.
That is correct. During, I'm going to make sure I have that right, during the pandemic work from home period. Now, if we were to, we don't have the president, David is his name, but I bet the period that they may have been looking at was when most folks were sent home. And we have some information from Fujitsu with 80,000 employees that kind of touches on the same thing. But this is the period when people were most workers were still at home because offices were closed and nobody knew what was going to happen. So people were at home for a prolonged period of time. Things have changed, right? Things have opened up, restrictions have loosened up. And we've got some data that we want to show you what's happened as a result for 15 months or 5 quarters since that period of time. But Dave, that period of time produced results for companies in the positive direction of productivity. Yeah. And during that period of time, the Department of Labor and Statistics also had data that showed that productivity gains were occurring while workers were mostly at home, especially knowledge-based workers. They were producing productivity gains for their organizations.
You know, I mean, you think about the benefits of working from home, right? You have the ability to maybe sleep in a little bit longer. Perhaps you're a little less stressed, so you're sleeping better. Maybe you're eating better because you have access to your kitchen. Less distractions as far as just a water cooler type talk. Even though it's important to still communicate with your coworkers, there was probably a lot less interruption between employees just to vent about, something that's happening, or venting about your job or venting about your personal life. I think a lot of that was easier to do when you were sharing walls with people, running into people in the hallway. Me myself, I think about when I was working in an office, there was a lot of that going on. Hey, come on, grab a coffee with us real quick. So you think you're going down for a 5-minute coffee, it turns into a 15-minute coffee. No one was playing. I had worked at an office that had ping pong table, so they're putting these things out there to help with the maybe morale or have people interact. But I'm sure that there were certain people that would become a distraction. I wouldn't say it would be the masses, but
do you remember the movie? As you're saying that, Dave, I'm thinking about the movie, and I know this is anecdotal. But the movie with Jennifer Aniston, was it called The Office or The Office Workplace, or what was it called?
Office
Space, or do you remember that movie?
Of course, I remember that movie. Yeah, that made me read. That was Office Space came out. I believe it was like 1999.
Yes, right around that. And Jennifer Aniston was just getting started. And when you say that water cooler and the name of the office manager, he would go around. Yeah, but maybe we got to move that office. And you had the guy
Thornburg?
that's stuttered. No,
What was his name?
No, but don't take my
Goldberg.
stapler. Don't take my stapler. Don't take it. And he burned down the place. But even during the process, how it was poking fun at work culture, right? That all these people worked in an office. People were playing, that one guy was playing Tetris, right? And I remember, when I worked more, and this is before what I'm doing now, when I first started my professional career, I remember I'd fall asleep at my desk. I just bored to death. And I know other people did that. They played Tetris. And it's funny because when that movie came out in '99, I was still in my previous role as a manager, and I knew that was going on. And so, how do you separate what people do in an office if that's their habits? It gets back to the discussion we're having about good workers versus ones that are not so good. If they're playing Tetris in the office or doing other things that are not providing productivity, efficiencies, they're probably going to do that when they go home. They're probably going to play Tetris. They're probably going to be on Netflix. And a lot of people, you've seen the interviews where the talking heads assume that everybody's playing Tetris. But if that were the case, productivity numbers would go down. They would have shot down dramatically where people were really locked indoors for those first 6 to 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that the evidence did not support that massive numbers of people were watching Netflix during work and productivity drop through the floor.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what do they say? If you're a slacker in the office, then chances are you'd be a slacker outside of the office. And I don't really think that's the norm. Organizations are trying to find the best talent that they can, top talent. They're not into slacking off. They're looking for results. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was groups of people that realized, hey, we have an opportunity to show our managers that we can work without being babysat. And
That's right.
This is your time to shine. Also, there wasn't a lot of, what else were people doing? It was a scary time. That beginning of the pandemic, people were home. You're worrying about so many different things. And I think to keep your mind off of the scary the first few months of that pandemic, it was scary, very stressful, worried about your health, knowing that people were getting COVID and you needed that opportunity to distract yourself. So
Yeah,
Putting in a couple
I
extra hours was a good thing.
yeah, and I had relatives at the very beginning that didn't make it, so it was a sad time for a lot of us that saw loved ones not be able to make it through that. And I think for a lot of folks like myself, um, and others who were trying to um, put some sense into what's happening and figure things out, you look at this and you say, hey, um, is there a better way? Can this help me take care of loved ones? Can this help me um, work through these conditions? And I think a lot of people um, decided, maybe this is a good way to do work where I can work, I can still be productive, and at the same time, I can also do the things that I need to do in order to, live a full life. And that's the next part that I want to get into. We still want to stay with the research part. So let's jump into the next piece of the study that we found. And a lot of this, we were able to, we want to give credit on a lot of this research. Some of this came from Forbes, and this is where we're getting some of this information about some of the research that they also found. So I want to credit Forbes, and their folks are putting some of this together as well. There's a study done by Ergotron of 1,000 full-time workers, and here's what they found: that a total of 56% of employees cited mental health improvements, better work-life balance, and more physical activity. And so 56, so 560 out of the 1,000 cited that as one of the things. And Dave, when I saw that, I'm reminded of a team. And I played college sports and I played high school sports. And I know that when the team is performing well, it's usually because all the players are healthy on the team and they can perform to their highest level.
For sure.
So if you have a team where the quarterback is either sick and he broke his foot, or he has an ankle problem, and that happened to us in one of our more important games, quarterback's ankle got jacked up. We were going to beat our biggest rival that we hadn't beaten in years, and we had them on the ropes. He got hurt. Our chances went down the tube because our backup just wasn't ready to play. He just wasn't ready.
And as a team, you probably saw that coming. Like all of a sudden, you were demotivated. You were deflated.
Yes.
We're out.
Yes. Yeah. And I look at, I think Netflix uses this as well in their corporate mindset. They have a kind of a game mentality from the fact that they have team members. Everybody's a team, and they all work together to try to strive for a common goal here. And if you look at employees in that way, that they're all part of a team and they're all trying to do something to help the organization win, wouldn't you want to have the best players on the field? And those players, you want them to have done their rehab, right? So they rehab their ankles and their shoulders or whatever else, so that when they get on the field, they can perform. So I think it's the same way for employees. Why wouldn't I want my employees to be mentally healthy, as physically healthy as they can possibly be with what they have? All of those things, healthy workers are good for the bottom line, right?
Oh, for
Why
sure.
wouldn't you want your employees to be mentally healthy and physically healthy?
And if you, I think we've seen this before. We have sales leaders who come into the office, and if they've had a bad morning, it sets precedent for the rest of the people on the team. I used to work in a sales group, and when the manager would come into the office, one employee would kind of get a temperature for how she's doing in the morning. And if her morning was going bad, there'd be a warning sign. Hey, things are careful. She's having one of those days. Or vice versa. Hey, I ran into her. It's gonna be a great day. Now that stress could have come from just just a 45-minute commute, into the office where there was maybe some road rage. It could have come from anything, of course, but there's a lot of stress when you're kind of commuting through a city. And if your leader walks into that office with a bad state of mind, it rubs off onto the entire team. So if you remove that from the equation, there's a better possibility that that person's stepping into the office in a more positive state of mind. And that was kind of what I was saying earlier, like even 30 minutes extra of sleep, not having to run out of the office and forget a couple of important things, starting your workday in a positive state of mind for yourself and for your team is so important.
No doubt. And I'm reminded something of, if we're sharing stats and information that are valuable to our audience, Dave, Barbie Brewer, formerly of Netflix, she's an HR exec there as well. And she had shared with us how she had talked to folks that were in the law enforcement community. She's out in California. And she had shared with us that that in her interactions with law enforcement, she kept hearing a theme that became very common, and that people that have long commutes, 40 minutes, an hour, there tends to be an increase in domestic violence. And those folks that don't have those types of commute, those types of situations don't happen as often. I'm paraphrasing, but I remember that was the essence of what she told us. And it gets back to your point about being mentally healthy. A long commute is not a healthy thing. It does not produce great outcomes. If we're trying to measure something and say, hey, that not only does it work, but it's producing a great outcome, then we want to do that. So if you can do whatever you can, and we're going to have Kevin O'Leary here in a moment on virtually and talk about the other piece of the long commute is that it doesn't do anything to reduce the carbon footprint. So if you are an organization or a person that says, I don't want to have those commutes, one, because it's mentally bad, but secondly, I'd like to do my part in reducing a carbon footprint. Long commutes are the opposite of trying to reverse the trend of putting carbon, or reversing what people want to do in this day and age, which is they're environmentally aware about what more carbon is doing to the environment.
Right. I kind of chuckled though when I heard that. It's what an interesting way to go. The feedback from that poll and kind of putting that as number one is removing yourself from it. It's less about I as a person like my home office. I like the flexibility. I like having everything in my home available to me all the time. But putting that carbon footprint thing out there and, I want to do my part as a good citizen, that's very clever. That's very clever. And I would think that I'm sure that there's a lot of people that honestly feel like that, but I'm sure that there's also people that were jumping on the bandwagon because that's an appropriate conversation that people have been having, for quite some time in this country. So it was kind of in my opinion, kind of sneaky how they did that. Good way to
he said it was the number. This is now Kevin O'Leary saying this in another interview where he said that was the number one thing the folks internally in his 54 companies that responded was number one on their list, reducing the carbon footprint. And he mentioned that he had companies in every state in the U.S. and several around the world. And he said he was surprised that was at the very top of the list, was reducing the carbon footprint, and that the commuting times don't do anything for that. And his folks want to do their part. And there was one way to contribute to that. I know it's amazing to hear that from folks that are in the business of making money. He's not a guy that I would say is wishy-washy about making money. We'll get to Kevin in a little bit, but I want to stay, Dave, if we could circle back to the research that we found. Another thing that we found in the research was that Within this Owl Lab study, they also found that job satisfaction was very high. And I'm going to quote here: continuing to embrace flexibility is essential. Most employees, in this case 88%, agree that the flexibility to work from home or the office has increased their job satisfaction. 88%. I don't know about you, Dave, but there are very few things where you're going to get agreement on just about anything like that these days. No matter what topic we're talking about, 88% is a very high, very, very high number to achieve in just about any question you're going to ask anybody. But this one is quite high, and it's astounding that it's that high.
So I'm obviously not shocked by that, right? I think people get to a certain point in their career and they start doing the math. When people were home during the pandemic, people are doing the math. They're realizing, hey, you know what? I was spending an extra 2 to 4 hours a day being non-productive, commuting back and forth. And extrapolate that. What does that mean? 2 times 5. Wow, that's 10 hours. That's 10 hours. And then when they talk about work-life balance, or how some others say it, how does Nicole Middendorf refer to work-life balance? She doesn't call it work-life balance.
She doesn't call it that. She's got, I don't know. I can't remember the phrase.
It's
but
a mix,
it's,
or yeah, but it makes more sense. It's about doing both together, at not necessarily at the same time, but it's not a balance. It's, you can live your life and you can work. You can give the attention that your family needs while giving the attention to your clients and your employees and your teammates.
Yeah, that's a Gary Vee thing too. He says it's not about or, it's about and, right? You can have an organization that is working from home, and if that's what they want to do, and you do have a cohort that want to be in the office. You can have it both ways, right? That's where hybrid comes into play. Or folks that are work from home permanently. And you can have folks that work in the office. Now, this does require, it is going to require, and it's already happening, Dave, it's going to require that especially larger organizations that are mostly impacted, they're going to have to rethink their real estate footprint. Because if you look at right now, major cities like New York, San Francisco, and Chicago, others, you'll see that the vacancy rates, or I should say the occupancy rates that are in those buildings has gone down because people just aren't there. And that does have a profound shift in, taxes and business development and how our whole world will function. Because if people are, 30, 40% of them are at home part-time or most of the time, then that means that resources are going to shift back to where people are essentially living. True. Versus the city centers. But it does, I think, present an opportunity. Barbie Brewer also mentioned this, and I'd never heard this before, that there's millions of square feet right now that are completely empty and unused. And it's an opportunity to reuse, redesign, and reimagine those workplaces, those offices, into things that could help the local community, whether it's urban farming, whether it's low cost housing, or any combination of all of that stuff and more that we haven't even thought of, that can help cities revitalize themselves and be more self-sufficient, as well as reduce the carbon footprint. Imagine if a lot of food were grown locally inside the city, inside urban farms, inside of workplaces that are currently empty. They don't have to truck a lot of stuff from the West, for us on the East Coast, over all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast. And I'm sure this can play out all around the country. And we all benefit from that, right? Less stress on the roads, less stress on the bridges, less stress on the infrastructure, which means as a taxpayer, the need to repair all of these things on an ongoing basis goes down, and we can redeploy those resources in a different way so that it still benefits the community.
Mm. And I think Kevin O'Leary had touched on this also, also kind of relates back into taxes. There's an opportunity here for people to move out of the big cities. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I've been hearing a lot about people moving out of San Francisco, moving out of Chicago, coming into the suburbs, because
That's right.
they don't have to be next door, to their job. They don't have, they want to come out, benefit from raising their family outside of a city, have an opportunity for maybe lower taxes, better schools, safer environments. And those are all benefits to the individuals. Probably put some tax constraints on those major cities because now they're obviously not collecting that money.
Well, I'm going to localize it for you. I lived in New York City. Think about folks that do that commute from New Haven, Connecticut into the city. Folks that live out in Long Island, in Suffolk County, or even further out. Folks that live, let's say, in Newark, or even further out south and west, as well as north of Newark, or up into Piermont, New York, doing that commute every single day. There's definitely less stress on the system if you are folks having to make that commute. But if you can live in New Haven and live your life in New Haven, why not? And do the work, not just live your life, but do the work.
Right.
There's a lot of folks that in the New York City area would love to just I could just plug in and not have to do that daily commute. Let's switch gears. In Houston, I lived in Houston for a while. Folks that live west out in Katy and Sugarland, in the Woodlands, they would love to live in those communities. Those are beautiful communities. On the West Coast, in Chicago, Chicago's got a bunch of wonderful neighborhoods all around the suburbs. It's as well as on the West Coast in Seattle and in LA. You have, all kinds of folks that live, whether it's in Santa Monica or you live in Venice or you live in some other area. You probably want to not hit the highways if you don't have to, right? All these major metro areas are suffering from a lack of well-built infrastructure to support those needs.
Mm-hmm.
So now if we dial that back a little bit, Dave, that infrastructure is not as stressed, and every citizen of America benefits from that because, again, we can redeploy those resources into areas where they're needed more. And not only that, but the amount of maintenance probably could go down, saving untold hundreds of millions of dollars every single year. So infrastructure can benefit as well, not just the human kind of infrastructure, but the kind that you and I use to hit the roads every single day.
Right. And listen, we know that not everyone can work from home and have a hybrid work environment, but I'm thinking about other industries like the transportation industry. I had read somewhere recently that trucking is one of the top 5 industries in this country. Mm-hmm. The trucking industry, when everyone is working at home, now they can be more efficient. They can be more productive. Less people on the roads.
Yeah, goods get around a lot faster if there's less congestion on the roads, and that's for sure. No doubt, Dave. I want to share this last bit of research, and we've found many other research points that our folks can use, our audience can use. But here's one that I think was really also very profound because it reflects workers' attitudes about remote work. Fujitsu is a company that has around 80,000 employees. In their offices in Japan, prior to the pandemic, they had done an internal survey. And what they found was that 74%, and let me read this exactly, 74% considered, quote, the office as the best place to work by far. of all the other options they had, 74% said that the office, going into the office physically in person, was where the best work got done. Now, they redid that survey May 2020. So that would have been, let's see, March, April, May, June. So like, let me do that. March, April, May. So 3 months after basically they were sent home, that number went down from 74% to 15%. Let me say that again. 74% of employees of the 80,000 that Fujitsu has in Japan said the office was the best place. That number went from 74 to 15%. That is
wild.
amazing. That is amazing. That is an amazing stat, because something has to be better. Something has to be profoundly better for the majority to now be the minority.
I wonder if Fujitsu deployed, I wonder what sort of tools they started using when they went home. There must have been something that increased collaboration, increased communication, increased morale, or just overall company culture. To go home with all the same tools, I would be shocked to get results that were that dramatically different. It must have been pretty sorry for the delay. I would like to think that they took some time, found tools to do these things better. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And for to borrow Gary Vee's, and those people's lives were changed because of that. I remember in that particular study, not only did the best place to work change, but in Japan, it is very common to have at least an hour commute, if not longer, to get to work. And that was one of the things that a lot of those folks were saying, that they were relieved that they didn't have to make those long commutes. And Japan has better infrastructure by any stretch of the imagination than we do here. They have bullet trains and all kinds of other stuff that can move them from one place to another very fast. And so to go in the short period of time where people are saying work is done in the office to now the best place is at home, it's a sea change. It's profound. I just want to say this, Dave, because I think it's important to note that I don't know if everybody realizes that, that the work environment, setting, and mindset that we have today about working in an office from 9 to 5 really stems from the 1940s. And in the 1940s was when America started adopting this type of work of 9 to 5 and going in at 9, coming out at 5, Monday through Friday, into an office, so to speak. That kind of mindset has stayed with us for almost 80 years.
Yeah, sure has.
We're not in the 1940s. The whole world is not in the 1940s. And I think it's time for our work to also reflect where we're at today. We have cell phones. We have collaboration tools. We have instant communications in so many different ways that allows all of this to the collaboration piece to happen instantly. I mean, we use those tools here within our organization, and we use them on a regular basis with our teams, and so it's a matter of a lot of places they don't have the muscle memory, and it's not no fault of their own. Dave, some places it just wasn't the thing, right? Getting on Zoom, getting on Teams, or Ring Central or Google Meet, it wasn't their thing. It was like a few people do it. Some of the execs, they do it when they are remotely, or some managers do it when they're working remotely. Now down to the everyday worker, or even the accountant or the logistics person, is using those tools to try to collaborate with colleagues. So a lot of organizations have had to build muscle memory, and that's okay. Like, we get back to our analogy of a team. If you're trying to run a West Coast offense with a new coach, it's going to take some time, right?
Oh,
If you don't have the right assets in place to run a West Coast offense, you're not going to be as effective. But even still, when you have a new playbook like a West Coast offense, and maybe you are a run and shoot team or a option offense team, if we use that analogy as well, from football side of things, all of a sudden you got to shift gears. Maybe you got to, start practicing new drills, and the timing has to be different. The receivers have to move different. The patterns have to be different. The drop steps of the quarterback have to be different, right? And that's essentially what I would equate to what's happened here in the last 3 years.
Right.
That new muscle memory has to be built. The playbook has changed. And, some, let's say organizations where the coach is maybe not a friend of the West Coast offense, is saying, let's switch from that because it didn't work. Well, it may not be that it didn't work so much as the players didn't really buy into the offense. Maybe the drills necessary to get us to a place to use the West Coast offense wasn't there. I mean, there's so many organizations, college and pro. And now the thing, if we were to run with it a little bit more in the sports analogy, is the run pass option, right? Not every organization is going to be effective at running the run pass option because they don't have the right coach, they don't have the right assets in place. But once you have the right assets in place and you have a well-oiled machine, collaboration online is no thing. It really isn't. It's okay, we have a meeting in an hour, or we're going to meet tomorrow, or tomorrow we have a meeting with a client and it's going to be on Zoom or Teams, right?
That's
so
right.
It's building that muscle memory. Now, Dave, did I forget anything about talking about muscle memory or any other research that we'd been doing prior to getting ready for this episode?
To use a sports analogy, when you're drafting people from anywhere, right?
Right.
These players are in the draft. They're willing to relocate. They'll turn up their entire family. They'll move to where the team is. And
No doubt.
when we put this into the corporate world, the HR recruiters now have this opportunity to look way beyond their area codes.
Yeah.
You don't have to rely on finding talent that's within 60 miles of your HQ. And to be able to do that, now you can really form your super teams, and pulling in talent from anywhere without them having to kind of uproot their entire family and relocate. That's a huge advantage.
No, of course. And I know we refer that's also leads into our virtual guest, Kevin O'Leary, which he talked about on this clip we're going to show here in a moment, about how the realities today have changed when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to retention, than it was, before 3 years ago, in 2019. And so if you're using that playbook for 2019, it's going to be a tough uphill battle for recruiting top talent. And they'll go elsewhere, or they just won't. In a draft, sometimes you can't ignore who drafts you, right? That's the only thing. But as a free agent, you can decide where you want to go, right? You can decide, no, I don't want to play for the Knicks, or yes, I want to play for the Mets, or I want to go over to the Yankees, right? And they want top talent, they'll pay for it. But if the Yankees had some weird rule about, maybe like Boston, you got to cut your hair to come here. I know some of those guys over for the Red Sox would be like, nah, I like my hair nice and long. I don't think I'm cut out for the Yankees, right?
Yeah. It does kind of come into the corporate culture, right? We work with folks that have tattoos and long hair and T-shirts, and that's really cool. And they can find those organizations that best suit, their personal style. That's cool.
No, and I think that's becoming more and more of a thing whereas before, I would say corporate culture was maybe fourth or fifth in terms of what people considered when they were looking for a job. it was always about the money, right? And money being at the top. But I think that started to shift. And you don't need 100% of the workforce to agree that corporate culture is important in order to make that a thing for recruiting. But enough are saying that, hey, I want a culture that fits me more than me fitting into that culture. And so speaking of culture, I want to bring on a clip that we have from Kevin and Ori. Are we going to play this now, or are we just going to talk about it and you play it?
Ventures in one of the sharks on the hit television show Shark Tank, favorite in my home. Okay, so let's just start here with this moral high horse business. Is working from home morally wrong?
No, it's not. The world's changed, the economy's changed, the ethics of work have changed. We went through an extraordinary period during the pandemic. The idea that you split up a headquarters and you let people leave a headquarters and work from home was not even contemplated, was considered too risky. Now it's a proven effective method of project management. In Elon's case, to be fair about what he's talking about, when you are in a highly engineered business like Tesla or SpaceX, I get the idea that you'd want collaboration between engineers that are sitting around trying to solve design problems or whatever. But it has nothing to do with the other 10 sectors of the economy, which have already made a decision. I have 54 companies in almost every state, in almost every sector. We now know what the percentage is. It's just under 40%, are never coming back to the office.
So we're not even talking about 2, 3, whatever. This is just like they aren't coming back in.
All right. So let's take this first bit of this segment. So 40% of his businesses, 40%. And this is for a guy who's a ruthless shark, right? They're not coming back to the office. Now, he could just fire them all. He says that all the time, right? Or no, not him, but he's like, we're not making a deal or whatever. He get rid of them, right? Replace them. Why not? Why not, Dave? These are people that couldn't he replace or no?
40% is a pretty big number. I think if you're, I guess you could just pick from the 60%, but the 40% that were at home have proven to be productive employees, productive producers. Yep. So sure he could, but why would he do that? Plus I think later in the clip,
couldn't he replace them? That's what I'm saying. Couldn't he just replace all 40%? I want everybody to come home tomorrow, come into work, into the headquarters. And, that's because that's the way I roll. And the corporate culture is eroding. So that 40%, they're all bad apples. Let's find replacements.
Kevin is a statistics, numbers, and money guy.
Okay.
He looks at those things first. He would replace them if he felt that there was a need to.
Interesting. No, well, I wanted to see what you thought about that. Because 40% is quite the number when it comes to the number of employees that he'd have to, he'd be looking at a big problem. So let's dive back into that conversation with Kevin, and so he can give us a little bit more insights into why he thinks the way he thinks when it comes to remote work.
Where they used to work in cubicles.
Right.
And they had to drive an hour to the office. They found a different lifestyle and they still get their work done. Now, I can make them work in the office and they'll simply say, thank you, but I'm going to work for somebody else, your competitor.
Right.
So we choose not to do that.
Right. And it's also the models themselves. So the New York Times, there's this great analysis the other day. Enough empty office space in New York City to fill 26 and a half Empire State Buildings. I mean, holy camole.
New York City.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues around that.
Right.
But I would just say, then you've got Disney saying, okay, get back in 4 days a week. Now, I will note, get back in 4 days a week is essentially giving up on a day, which is still a huge shift in and of itself, right? 20% shift. So is it really here to stay for the majority of workers? I mean, is this what you're going to see, empty buildings?
Yeah, it's here to stay. The economy has changed, not only domestically, but globally. The way that work has changed, and if you think about, let's say, the accounting department or let's say you've got a compliance issue and you're saying, look, we have to report to the regulator in financial services. I have many investments in financial services companies. Thursday, noon, deadline. I don't care when you do it at 2 a.m. or whether you get up and feed your children before they go to school. I couldn't care less, as long as on the drop dead date the work is done. That's project management.
So let's take that piece. That is so important. And this is the one of the things that we hear from a lot of customers is that the ones that are embracing it, people are in different time zones. I know that's the case for us internally here at our organization. We have folks in multiple time zones around the world. And as long as the work gets done within the time frame for different launches, for different projects, meeting the client expectation on when things need to be in their hands or proposals, does it matter if the employee wants to work at 8 p.m. or 8 a.m.? Right? I mean, we still have team things that we've set to have regular cadence on at certain times, right? We get together as a team.
Yep.
Or I should say different teams within the organization. But if you're at the end of the day delivering the goods or in the services in the time that it's required, and that's happening on a consistent basis and people are still happy to do their work, can't ask for more than that.
Right. And that comes with clearly defined goals and expectations, and once you've set that, to me, it doesn't matter if, again, it doesn't matter if you're doing that at 8 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock in the morning. Did you meet the goal? Did we exceed our goals? Did we exceed our expectations? And that's
No
how you
doubt.
measure success. I don't measure success as, hey, I stayed an extra 45 minutes in the office today. I'm a successful person. Well, did you meet those goals and expectations? Did you lay out goals and expectations?
Oh my. Yeah. And I have a side note story on that. I remember, when I was also working for the first company that I started off right after college, my first time in the headquarters building in Manhattan, I experienced that where it's a lot of important people there. And we couldn't get to going to dinner at a regular hour because everybody was taking their cues from the boss, the big boss. And so people didn't want to be perceived as being not loyal to the company or committed, right?
Yeah.
So you didn't want to leave an hour before as you're walking, hour before the hour before the boss left, and you got to go right by his corner office and he sees you. Dave, I'm making a note. He's leaving at 4:30, right? So people were really reticent to walk out the door because they think, I'm being perceived as not loyal and not committed. But sitting at a desk physically does not purport to productivity, right? And if we were to circle back when we're talking about productivity, we forgot to mention this in terms of productivity, because this is a good point to pause on Kevin's conversation. The Office of the Department of Labor put out some numbers recently about the last 5 quarters of productivity. And I'm going to just read you the summary because it is profound. It basically says, this is the first time productivity decline has remained negative for 5 consecutive quarters since the beginning of 1948. That is crazy. That's just crazy. So 5 consecutive quarters is equivalent of 15 months. So 5 quarters times 3 is 15. So 15 months of continued low growth when it comes to productivity. And you got to go back to 1948. So if we're looking at the big picture, there's a lot happening here. And they said here, they go on to say, the non-farm business sector labor productivity decreased by 2.1% in the first quarter of 2023, despite output increasing 0.5% and hours worked increasing. So more people working, 2.6%. Now, so Dave, I'm not an economist, but I want to understand this more. And what is this productivity number measuring? And this is something everybody can understand. So I was like, what does this mean? So from the labor department, labor productivity is used to measure the output per hour worked. And it measures, and this measurement reflects the efficiency with which labor is used in the production process. So it's an efficiency metric. Okay,
Yep.
I got that. Understood. So if we have less efficiency for 15 months in a row, then there's something that's really changed. So what has changed? Because prior to that, prior to those 15 months, if you walk back on the math, then you put us, the US, in a situation, oh, wait, go beyond that. We were seeing really high productivity gains, and we were seeing and we were all, for the most part, at home working, versus the loosening of restrictions that allowed people to go back into office and start working at the office again. So it's probably other things mixed in there, but if you were to add one of those factors into the mix of the lack of productivity, you would say going and opening up again and allowing people to be on site at work contributed to some of this, because we were in the opposite when we were in the throes of 2020, that whole year. We were experiencing high productivity, and productivity did not drop off until after the opening up and people going back into an office, which in itself is amazing. The stats tell us something has shifted in the entire country, where for 15 months the efficiency of work has gone down. Right?
I wouldn't be surprised when things opened up and people were returning back to work. So in my family, my wife's organization said back to the office. There is nothing else at home. It's not hybrid. Everyone is back to the office. And I spoke to 100 people where that's what it was like. I spoke to another 100 people that it wasn't like that. Those people go back to the office. They have a chip on their shoulder, and they're spending their time looking for new jobs, looking for new opportunities for organizations that want to work from home. I mean, that's going to take a lot of productivity out of a lot of wind out of the sails of any momentum that they had. If you had half of your workforce that come back, they know that they personally can be productive working hybrid, working from home, working from anywhere. If their boss said, you come back in, just like Kevin said, they'll find something else. They'll go to work for your competitor. But
Yes.
they're spending company resources and time to find those new opportunities. And they were demotivated heavily. I was surprised by those numbers.
Yes, and it's a significant number, and I think that once you have a taste, and I know people that are, if you're talking about, let's say, giving people freedoms and rights, right? If you put it in that kind of concept, the moment you give them freedoms and rights, the less likely they're going to want to go back, right? Right? More healthcare, better healthcare. You give me that today, I'm not going to want to go back to worse healthcare, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more freedom you give me around how I can express myself, how I can deliver my work, and I could do it in a productive way, the less likely I'm going to want to just go back into the box where I can only sit at a desk somewhere in a city somewhere to do that work.
Yep.
Right? So we're in that place. You can't put the genie back in the bottle when it comes to this type of, I don't want to equate it to freedom, but the concept of the ability to have something, a benefit that you had. I don't want to reverse that. I don't want to. We don't want to get up at 6 a.m. and get in the car or get in the train and do that whole thing. Like you said, 2 hours in each direction every day that I don't get back. I could do a lot with that 2 hours. I could go work out. I could walk my dog. I could take care of my kid. I could do whatever I want that I wasn't getting paid to do. You know, I'm not getting paid to sit in traffic for an hour, and the gas and the work and the ties and everything else that goes with it. And I think Kevin, mentions, $150 a month, or maybe we could pick back up on the conversation that $150 a month just on lunch. So why spend that $150 somewhere else? Just spend it right here with the food that I want to eat. So, Ori, pick up that conversation back up with our virtual guest, Kevin O'Leary.
And here's the thing that you can measure it by. Prior to the pandemic, I was very fortunate in a portfolio basis to make 15% free cash flow pre-tax. Today, that same portfolio, post-pandemic, with 40% of the staff working remotely all around the world, is going to do 17.5% free cash. That's a 20% increase in free cash flow. So you can't tell me this doesn't work. In fact, I want to do more of this because I'm reducing my costs of real estate.
And one last thing here. How does this impact what you're seeing when you look at Shark Tank? You're about to start the 15th season.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, we're very proud of that.
So, as a huge fan, so what are you seeing changed?
So we have a record number of applications, and there's a single reason why. It's gone back to 2008 when we started. There is no venture capital money available right now.
So there was a really important number that came out of that, Dave. The free cash flow went up from 15 to 17.5%. And as Kevin noted, 20% extra money in his pocket. What is there to argue about across his 54 companies around the world and thousands of employees that he's got under his roof? If that move, and I think you've said in other interviews, I'm trying to do more of it instead of less. How can we, as an organization, as a C-level person, increase the profitability of a company? This is one play in that playbook, right? There's many that you can play in the playbook. This is one. And if it's putting more to the bottom line, and at the same time, we take in all of the things we talked about earlier, happier employees, better retention, healthier employees, mentally more refreshed, or mentally better. Who would want to argue at improved carbon footprint? Why would you be against that if the organization is not going to suffer, right?
And the alternative is growing all of your businesses by 20%, which puts more strain on the people, more strain on your expenses, resources. It's just a no-brainer at that point. He's a very smart guy, and the numbers don't lie.
The numbers don't lie. This is a guy where, he is ruthless. He is hard. I'm a fan of Shark Tank. So Shark Tank, I'm a fan. Kevin, I'm a fan of what you do. All the sharks. All right. These guys are ruthless when it comes to number. He's a VC guy, so he knows his numbers. And if it were going to make the bottom line worse, I think he'd have pulled the plug on it and said, everybody get your butts back into the office. End of story. Like a lot of CEOs and other C-level are saying today. But we're not seeing that. Not from him. Not from him and a self-professed guy that loves money. I think he said in an episode, I love money and money loves me, or something to that effect. I want to give big props to Kevin for highlighting this, because A, it's making him more money, and B, his employee base is happier because they get to continue, doing the work they like, doing it from home, and he benefits as well. So it can be a win-win organizationally for the folks at the C-suite, as well as the everyday manager and worker that's at the company.
Yeah. Very cool.
So Yes. So, Kevin, big props to you. Now, let's see. We're going to roll into LinkedIn poll. Okay. So let me see how to transition it. All right. And you know what, Dave? We don't just want to take Kevin's word for it when it comes to the employees that saying they don't want to go back to work. We actually did a LinkedIn poll recently, and we had, let me see, it was over 600 respondents on that poll. 636 professionals from LinkedIn responding to the question, do you find remote work beneficial? Simple question. And they either say, yes, I'm in Remoteville, meaning, yeah, I find it beneficial, or no, not really. And the big number, it is so close to the Fujitsu number. And that's what's even more amazing. 89.5% responded, yes, remote working is beneficial. Isn't that crazy, Dave? Our numbers are in line with the 80,000. Our sample, let's just call it around 600-ish, are in line with what the 80,000 workers that were surveyed for Fujitsu. The numbers virtually match. I don't know about you, but I'm completely amazed at that. I would have never thought that.
Well, I like when numbers line up like that. You know, if it was skewed completely the other way, you know, you'd kind of wonder about your pool of folks that participated in the survey.
Yeah.
But yeah, almost 90% of 636 professionals. They're like, yep, we work from home, find it beneficial.
Amazing.
That's amazing.
Amazing. And, you know, it does beg the question that, you know, maybe we should do a couple of more of these polls. We've got some more in the way. So we'll be bringing you more of these types of polls on LinkedIn. So if you're watching us and you participate on our LinkedIns, I want to thank you for that, because you're actually contributing to a really good information that we're trying to get in understanding the community, in understanding professionals on LinkedIn, and how they work, what the preferences are, what are the things that you're seeing, so that then we could, you know, amplify that message and bring it to not only the LinkedIn community, but also other professionals that are trying to make decisions, you know, based on, you know, information. So what we want to do is try to enlighten and inform professionals about work from home. And this episode, we've tried to do that with some of the research that we've done, highlighting Kevin from Shark Tank. There was many more we could put in here, but this is some of the more powerful and more recent information that could be used in giving remote work a strong case. And, you know, Dave, one other thing that I did want to point out is there was another a Harvard Business Review study, and it had talked about why remote work fails, because it does fail for some organization. And it fails, and we talked a little bit, touched on this, like, you know, having the wrong playbook. One of those reasons is that remote work really depends on, like what you said, we have to have some clear goals. We also have to have the right tools. And that goes not just from, you know, furniture, desks, you know, a display, but also the communications tool, because now where maybe you walked a couple cubicles down to go see Susie or Lenny or whomever in accounting, now they're all virtual. And one of the reasons they cited several reasons. One of those reasons for the breakdown, besides the goal setting, was the communication and collaboration. And there's so many tools out there today that can make that happen. But from our conversations with firms that are remote, sometimes they just have so many tools that some of them are underutilized, some of them are not integrated, and you end up with a worker that's doing contextual switching. And that contextual switching can be detrimental from a mental fatigue perspective. So one of the things that we've been working recently and just want to put out there is that things have changed from just even a year ago when it comes to these tools. And there's ways to integrate them so that instead of having 5 apps, maybe you have 1 or 2. And in some cases, we've found organizations that have way many more than that. that the average remote worker is having to switch back and forth. And a lot of these things can be consolidated today. And I think we're seeing more of that now from the communications and collaboration side. Is there a way to unify? Is there a way to consolidate so that we don't lose any efficiencies, but at the same time remain productive at the levels that we're currently performing? And I think the resounding answer to that is yes. And if that's something that your organization is confronted with, we'd be glad to assist you. You could go to our website. You can go to circuitloops.com and hit us up, or hit us up on social media. We're on all the social platforms, and let us know, hey, we'd love to find out how we can consolidate some of these apps so that we can be more productive in our workflow and streamlining it. Dave, anything you wanted to add to that?
Like Kevin said, there's 40% of the workforce that said they are not going back. There's no need to lose the sense of community, the sense of team, and the collaboration with all the tools that we have available, that are available to us. I've even seen virtual workspaces in the metaverse where organizations are building a virtual office where you create an avatar of yourself. You have your headset on. You can walk into these workspaces. They have meeting rooms. You can communicate with people. I'm trying to remember the one that I was just recently. I just want to give them a shout out if this is it. Virbela, Virbela. If you're looking at virtual workspaces, Virbela is something that I found recently on LinkedIn. Pretty cool, and just like I said, you're there. You can see your teammates, but you didn't have to commute to get there. You're just in your home, but you have you have the presence of everyone else, and it's just a fun way to kind of interact with people. And there's a lot of work things you can do, presentations from in there, general meetings, a lot of AI stuff, and then there's also when what do they call it? Sometimes they call it forced fun, where it's, all right, everybody, we're going into the city. We're going to do a team building exercise and whatever it might be. But they do like different virtual team building exercises, and it's just really cool. If you get a chance, check out Virbela, Virbela. It's something kind of new and exciting.
There you go. And I think this is, watch this space, because I would imagine with so much happening fast and rapidly in the world of AI, the collaboration tools, the metaverse, all of these things that are, it's been 6-9 months, really, the last couple of 6-9 months, things are going to change. And so we're going to find ourselves probably having to revisit this topic a little bit more often than not, and probably refreshing the playbook a little bit more as more things come online in terms of information and research. And we will stay on top of this because it is really relevant to the 89% of folks that responded on LinkedIn. And I'm sure more broadly, more folks that are working from home around the world. Dave, we have some other wonderful episodes with our guest, Steve Cadigan, who was on here talking about this and more. And he went into great detail on what he's done around what he's done around the work from home and the future of work, and clients he's worked with, and what he's found in working with mid-level and C-level managers when it comes to remote working. I invite you to join us at circuitloops.com or wherever you consume your podcast, so that you can participate alongside us in those episodes. And we'll see you next time.